Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't know how many of you have ever had the chance to shout in a box canyon. If you get it just right, and it's just the right time of day, sometimes when you shout into a box canyon, what you shout echoes back at you differently. It's this magical thing of the temperature of the air, what the wind currents are doing, what the plants are, what season it is, and somehow whatever you shout bounces off the walls, resonates through the stone, and when it finally gets back to you, it sounds different. We've been hearing now for decades calls for action. I have a book, like I'm sure that many of you do, those well-worn books that you constantly return to. One of the books that I'm constantly returned to is, it's called Words That Echo Through Time. And it's a collection of remarkable speeches throughout the history of mankind. So I think about the power of words and what words can mean and how words and actions can bounce through history and time. We've been having really uncomfortable discussions. We've been sharing our words with each other and our thoughts and our feelings, not only in this building, but I think at kitchen tables and street corners across this nation and across the world. We've been bouncing our ideas and words off each other. We've found a space to talk about that uncomfortable reality that this great nation that we love is still fraught with racism. We have work to do. Even just yesterday, the Marines came out with guidance of saying, you know what, we're not going to accept the Confederate flag anymore as part of a representation of how we want to represent our country. Those were just words on paper. But wow, do those words have meaning. Those will be words that echo through time. We are shouting right now. We have heard the shouts. We have seen these masses of people gather at embassies across the world and on our front steps, shouting that it is time for change, shouting the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, using their names, using those words to remind us of this moment in time where they're asking us to take action. I've been appreciative that when I've gone out to these protests and had the conversations at the street corner, I've noticed while people are grappling with the complex topic of how to acknowledge that we still have a country fraught with racism, everyone extends kindness to our police forces and saying they are good, they serve our communities. But I believe that the best efforts over the past years have failed to succeed in changing policing, while the few remain, we must act. We are not solving a recent and isolated incident. 217 is an attempt to solve a long existing issue with ideas that have been discussed and worked on by many people. Sunday, I joined the student protest on Colfax. And as in all protests or marches, you start to read the signs, right? Particularly in this age of masks, where maybe we can't communicate as clearly, these signs become the visual representations of the words that we are trying to shout. And what I kept seeing were signs that just said 217, 217. How interesting. In this building where just yesterday, our minority leader took time to kind of explain the coded nature of our bills and what these words mean and what that number is. We had a group of citizens who were walking on the street that grabbed onto a bill number as a sign of hope and a request for change. 217, 217. That afternoon, I went down and had the unusual experience of going to a restaurant. What times are these? And I was chatting with one of our friends who's a bartender there, which was the reason we went down, just to go chat with him, basically check in, see how he's doing. And I'm sure as many of you have had, what have you been doing during quarantine? How are you doing? And he said, when I was a kid in Atlanta, I used to fish a lot. And so I've tried to, quarantine, I haven't had as much to do. I've taken up fishing, I can do it alone. It's been great, gotten all my gearbox back together. And he was talking about the places around kind of the Denver area that he'd been exploring. We were just innocently talking about fishing. Literally fishtails. But then without any really remarkable and tenor conversation, he said he found this great pond that he really wanted to go to explore. He was looking at Google Maps, saw what he thought was a trail that he could get to this great little fishing spot he thought it would be, shaded, nice trees, good overhanging foliage. And he got there and saw that the trail looked public, no signage, but it went through an apartment complex around a gated community. And my friend decided to not go fishing that day because he was worried that as a black man carrying a fishing tackle box, someone would probably call the cops on him. Not because they thought he was going to go fishing, but because of the implicit bias in our society, sees a black man not as a fisherman, but probably someone that's up to no good. We are shouting.
Senator Donovan, would you like to go into your second 10 minutes?
Incredible timing, yes. When we were on the steps last week, there was a young woman there, young enough that glow-in-the-dark bracelets are just about the coolest thing. And I was there to listen while others talked about the introduction of 217 and what the steps that we were going to take as a body to respond to the shouting. And in a voice that was happy and gleeful that matched the excitement of a glow-in-the-dark bracelet, she said words that did not match her tone of voice. And as she took the bracelet and was snapping it onto my wrist, she said, "Please pass this bill. I don't want to be terrified anymore." People are shouting, and I really hope that this time when we shout, it rings through history differently.